Hi, and welcome to Storyfest 2022. My name is Lolita, and I am a second-year student at Middlesex University, and I'm currently studying creative writing and journalism as a second year. We have on this panel, we have Kristell and Bluemoose books today, and you can just say hi and give a bit more information about yourself, please. Sammy, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I'm Sammy Smith. I own Kristell, which is an imprint of Grimbold books. So we publish science fiction, fantasy, dark fiction, and all the little subgenres therein. We are award-winning. The British Fantasy Society deemed us in 2017 to be the best small press. And we've got a range of nominated authors that write with us. And we're based in Oxfordshire in the United Kingdom.
Hi everybody, my name's Kevin Duffy, and together with Heather, my wife, we founded Bluemoose Books in 2006. We remortgaged our house to find voices that weren't being published by the mainstream. So those writers from disadvantaged backgrounds, working class writers, writers of colour. And we've won several awards. We published a book called Raising Sparks by, you might have heard of him, a bloke called Ariel Khan in 2018. Yeah, and one of our books, The Gallows Pole by Benjamin Myers, is being filmed at the moment by BBC. It's being directed by Shane Meadows of This Is England fame. So it's going to be a six-part BBC One drama coming to your screens this autumn. So look out for that. And we're based in Hebden Bridge, which is in West Yorkshire.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm here with Bia. She's my co-host. So if my internet connection doesn't work so well, Bia will be asking the questions, and yeah. Right, so the first question that we have is what inspired you or drove you to set up your own publishing house or imprint? And can you talk about your career and explain what services your company provides to authors? Sammy, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah. So Grimbold Books was started in 2013 / 2014, just sort of rolling over. And it came about because I was writing my first book at the time on a website called Autonomy, which those that have been writing a long time will remember. It was run by HarperCollins as an online forum for aspiring writers. So you would post up little snippets of your writing and people would critique it. Some critiques were worth their weight, others not, but that, as is life. And I met quite a lot of people that way, along with Zoe Harris, who I started Grimbold with, and we were both writing books. I finished my debut fantasy, submitted it around to a lot of small presses and bigger places, had a few offers, read their contracts, and thought, oh, blimey, they're they're wanting a lot for not giving very little. Zoe has a history in copy editing and publishing. So we started Grimbold with the initial idea that it would be a platform for writers to then springboard their career onto bigger things. I'm not going to say better because small presses are vital, but onto bigger things. And so with several other authors from Autonomy, we set up our contracts, started publishing, and sort of grew from there, really. Science fiction and fantasy is my staple. I love it, can't get enough of it. So it seemed very natural to sort of go towards that area of publishing rather than mainstream fiction, crime, thriller, whatnot. And yeah, we've sort of grown. I think at the last count, as I was doing all the deposits for the library earlier, we're at about 80 different publications now in the last 9 years. If you include individual authors in collections and anthologies, probably 50 to 60 authors. The last few years in COVID, we've been quiet because, like any small business, for me anyway, Grimbold is a side project aside from my main job. So I've been focusing on my main job, but we've just opened up submissions again for novellas. So we're hoping that from 2022 onwards, we can start building our catalogue back up again to where it was pre-pandemic.
Thanks, Sammy. Yeah, as I said, we started in 2006 to kind of, I've been working in publishing for, well, now I've been publishing for about 35 years, but prior to launching Bluemoose Books in 2006, I've been working in sales and marketing for some of the big 5 publishers. Headline, which is part of Hachette, which is the second largest publisher in the world. So I looked after sales and marketing in London as a sales rep, and I moved around I've sold for and done marketing for business publishers, academic publishers, non-fiction publishers, trade publishers. So my background was in sales and marketing. But in 2006, we set up the company because the voices that we wanted to hear and the stories that we wanted to kind of read about just weren't being published, because the whole nature of publishing changed in 1995 when the netbook agreement went, and discounting, which is now so huge and massive that it makes it the larger publishers have become so risk averse, which means that kind of the independent publishers are doing most of the heavy lifting in regards to literary fiction, which is what we publish. Last year we had our best year ever in 2021. 3 of our books were shortlisted for 5 major literary prizes. Leonard and Hungry Paul, which we published in 2019, we've now sold 50,000 copies of that. His second book, Penenka, which we published last year, has just been shortlisted for the Irish Novel of the Year. And we've sold TBM rights. We've sold books in translation into 20 countries. We have a literary agent in America that looks after the North American market for us. We've got a literary agent in Paris, Deborah Druber, who looks after all our books in translation. And we have a film and TV agent, Tanya Tillett, who works for the agency, and she's based in London. So we've got books in translation, books in the States, TV and film. We've all got those covered. And our contracts are copper bottomed. We always ask our debut authors to run them past the Society of Authors, just to make sure that they're happy with them, and that they're standard contracts, 10% of invoice value. We publish hardback, paperback, digital. We've just started doing our own audio books with Sharon Dougal's Should Be Fall Behind, which was chosen for the BBC's biggest book program called Between the Covers last March. So that's coming out in audio in about 3 months' time. So instead of going to Audible, Bluemoose and Audrey and the author, it gives us more control with the audio books, and the author gets more income from that as well. So yeah, that's Bluemoose.
Thank you. That's really amazing. There's so many questions that we usually have about publishers and how it works and things. So it's really interesting to have you both talking about what you do. What would you say you offer as an independent publisher that a mainstream publisher does not?
So with Grimbold, we a bit like Kevin actually, we take risks that other publishers potentially won't. The bigger publishers, it's all about the bottom line, money, saleability, whereas we're about the voice. Certainly Grimbold and unsung stories as well within science fiction and fantasy. We are looking for almost like the what the hell story, something that's outside of the genre, outside of the norm, something that we're passionate about, that we read the first few pages and we know we've got to take this. It's not necessarily about how much money we will make from a project, which sounds very backwards for a company. Of course we want profits, but actually we want the voices to be heard. We want these books out there that people can read. Like Bluemoose, we do audiobooks, but we do them through Audible. We do ebooks, print, hardback and paperback. And for us, we're a family, we're a small team. Predominantly we have in-house editors. Cover art goes elsewhere, but in-house editors, and what we can offer is more that personalized service. We don't do it with every author, but I do mentor debut novels and novelists that come through. So if that book comes through in that submissions process to us and it's not quite ready to be published, I only do one a year, maybe one every 2 years, but I will take that novel with the author and we will work through and we'll developmental edit it right up to the stage that it's ready for publication. Big companies don't have the time to do this. Their lists are 2 years in advance and they set their catalogues very strictly. You know, we have the Q1, 2, 3 and 4, and they know what title is coming out and they know which one's their lead title and they know this 12 months in advance. Whereas Grimbold, we have the flexibility to push things back if there's a family emergency. It's all about communication and working within a small team. And like Kevin said, we do exactly the same with our contracts as well. Society of Authors always, standard industry rates, 10% of RRP for print, but we offer 50% of profit when we sell direct at conventions, for example, for authors. So we're not as big as Bluemoose entirely. We haven't been going as long, and I don't have Kevin's background, which sounds absolutely amazing. But if we're going direct to a convention with 50 copies of someone's book, I want that author to be proud of what they're saying. So I'm not going to give them 10%. I'm going to give them 50% of what we raise, because it's, like I said, we're a team and we're a family. So we're able to do quite a lot that bigger publishers don't. Bigger publishers have dedicated marketing and sales teams. We work together and we work at a pace that the author is comfortable with.
Yeah, we like Sammy, we say we're a family of readers and writers, and we're there for the writer's career. And we build our kind of readership slowly. If I use one example, Ben Myers, we've published his first book in 2012 called Pig Iron, and he'd had a contract with Picador, but they didn't want Pig Iron because it was about a young man from a traveling community who wanted to escape his family surname, and they said who would be interested in a working class character from a small northern town. That small northern town was Durham, which was a theological capital of Europe for 2,500 years, hence the huge cathedral on top of the hill. And why wouldn't someone want to read about a working class character? So they didn't publish it. We published Pig Iron, which won the inaugural Gordon Byrne Prize. We then published Beastings, his second novel, in 2015, which won the Portico Literature Prize. So that was a £10,000 prize. And his third novel with us, The Gallows Pole, won the world's richest literary prize for historical fiction, which was £25,000 Walter Scott Prize. His next book we couldn't afford, so he's now published by Bloomsbury, and they published a book called The Offing. Ben is now the biggest non-German author in Germany. They sold 300,000 hardback copies of The Offing last year in Germany. He's now published in, I think, 18 countries around the world. But without the backing of a small independent like Bluemoose, perhaps he wouldn't be in the position he's in at the minute. And we're really proud that we've been kind of on that kind of, I don't want to sound like Simon Cowell and The Journey, but without Bluemoose investing in him as a writer with our editorial team, perhaps he wouldn't be where he is now. And he always mentions Bluemoose when he's been interviewed around the world. So that's what small independents can do. The bigger publishers, pre-1995, pre the netbook agreement going, you would have a 4-book deal. Now it's a 1-book deal, perhaps a 2-book deal. I remember speaking to Val McDermott when she gave Ben one of his prizes, and she said that she wouldn't be published now because the publisher didn't make any money until her 4th book. publishers won't wait until the fourth book because they need to make money on the book. And I think I really do think it's the independent sector, even though I moan about the bigger publishers being risk averse. It gives us a unique opportunity to find those writers that don't fit the P&L line, the profit and loss line that the big publishers do. And I've got loads of stories over the past, if we've got time later to talk about some of the books that we published that became word of mouth bestsellers, and having the big five ring me up, offering me gargantuan sums of money to publish them. And we turn them all down because they wait for the smaller publishers to do all the hard work. I always say that kind of Bluemoose is we're the delicatessens of the publishing world. We don't publish that much, but what we do publish stays with you for longer. And the big five are more like the supermarket, stack them high, sell them cheap. And that's not being disparaging to them, but that's their business model. And it's very profitable at the moment. I mean, the big five are making huge sums of money, but we do it differently, and we think we're finding that the great new voices that they don't want to take a punt on.
Absolutely. I think we're very similar as well. We don't publish a lot, but what we do, you're going to get our full attention, because as a small business owner, when we're investing just in the cost of putting the book out there, the editing, the formatting, and we use print on demand, so we don't buy stock up front, but editing, formatting, cover art, you're talking the best part of £1,500 roughly per title before we even start selling. And for a small press that's funded purely by myself, I didn't remortgage my home, but I put all my savings into the company. We're taking on those projects that we love and that we want to nurture and that we're really passionate about. So of course we're going to do our very best when those books go live to push them and sell so that we can get that money back. Certainly Grimbold doesn't make a huge profit, but what we do make is enough to then finance the books going forward. I'm never going to be able to retire on Grimbold money, but I'm always going to be able to keep pushing these new voices, getting the books out there, and hopefully these people helping to build their career up. And like I said, I don't want to say better things, but bigger things, and chasing that dream of a big five publisher, and getting the notoriety that they actually want and deserve.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you. What would you say? Would you say that the publishing industry has lost some of its value, or like the value is different a bit based on the amount of people that now choose to self-publish compared to?
I think it's a business, for the big five. I mean, it's a business for us because this is, it's my only job. But for the big five, it's kind of rapacious capitalism, isn't it? If you're Penguin Random House and you publish a third of the world's books, they're a €30 billion operation. They're owned by Bertelsmann. They have more accountants in Gütersloh than they do have editors. But if you've got to, when you're the CEO of Penguin and you come out every year and say that you've got to grow by 10% and you've got to increase your dividend by 10% to your shareholders, you've got to make about €3 billion on your operation just to pay back the shareholders who've invested in your company, which means you have got to be risk averse, because you've just got to replicate the successes that you've had and other genres within the industry and other publishers have had, just to create the income, just the turnover. So they're, if you look at the Penguin list for 2023, I think they've got 2 new literary fiction authors on their lists. And for a €30 billion operation, that's just dismal. But you can see it's a business. We're a business. We're not a library. We've got to sell books to make enough money to publish our books going into 23 and 24. I mean, I'm looking at books now where we've got a list for 2024 already. So I'm now reading stuff for kind of 2025. But I think we're told by all the independent bookshops, which we have a fantastic relationship with, that when readers go into the bookshops and want to find literary fiction, they're not going into kind of Waterstones. They're not looking at the kind of the big five. And I'm not saying that the big five don't publish, some great literary fiction, but the stuff that's kind of really cutting edge and kind of stays with you is coming from the smaller independents. because we can spend time with our authors editorially, whereas the big five just want to get the books out as quickly as possible. A bit of a generalization, but it's true, I think.
No, I echo all of that. Absolutely. And when it comes to comparing to self-publishing as well, you know, in the last 10 years, self-publishing has exploded with KDP and Amazon and all sorts. And there's always going to be a market for that. And, you know, if anybody wants to self-publish, then that's absolutely wonderful. But what we offer that self-publishing don't is self-publishing is self-publishing. You are doing everything yourself, which if you've got the drive, that's absolutely fine. But certainly with us, we have a lot of introverts with Grimbold, a lot of introverts that potentially don't want to go and market, you know, every single minute of the day. They want to be part of a team. They want to hand their manuscript to us. They want it to be edited, have conversations two-way, look at the cover up, because they don't have the time to do it themselves. And you know, a lot of self-published authors who are successful, and I'm not generalizing to be disparaging at all, they're putting out a very formulaic series of books, certainly in science fiction and fantasy. A lot of the self-published female authors, for example, will be doing romance heavy or erotica heavy stories with the same sort of set scenes and characters, and they're quite what's the word, formulaic as they go, whereas Grimbold, actually we want stories that don't fit that criteria, that potentially aren't going to sell thousands and thousands, but they are going to be unique, and they are going to get that author's name recognized at awards, within the genre, at conventions, so that someone goes, oh yeah, you know, Sammy H.K. Smith, yeah, I know that, she's Grimbold, and she's also got Adam Dalton West at Grimbold, Tom Lloyd, Joanne Hall, you know, all these authors that are Gemmell Award nominated authors or British Fantasy Award winning authors. So it goes back to that family sort of feel with us. I don't feel that the industry is changing too much for indie presses. I think indie presses are always going to be here. We're always going to be, I think, the backbone of the publishing. And of course, you've got the big presses that are the meat, and they're taking the cream of the crop of profits, and you've got indie publishers who are there as well, but you're always going to need, sorry, you've got self-publishers that are there as well, but you're always going to need the indies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to be honest, there's so much out there. It's very confusing sometimes when you see the amount of information there is, like, online, and when you talk to other people, it can get very big and overwhelming very quickly.
One of the issues
one of
with
the questions that we had a lot, like, no, go on.
No, I was just going to say about kind of self-publishing, and one of the issues with self-publishing is all about editorial, because sometimes, you know, the main difference between self-publishing and obviously kind of independent or traditional publishing is that we have editors that will make your book a better book, because they are your first reader's eyes. Sometimes if you're self-publishing, you're so involved and forensically involved in your own book, you don't realize that there may be some issues with your story or the structure or even timelines. And that's where, you know, when we get a manuscript, we say to our authors, it could be up to 2 years before we publish, because we want to work, you know, on a weekly, monthly basis with you, line by line with your story, to make it the best it can be. Because if we're asking people to spend £20 or £10 on a book, you know, it's got to be spot on, and it's got to compete, and it's got to be better than what's out there. And again, with self-publishing, with the Amazon algorithm, with the metadata that they have, it only seems to work. It doesn't work for literary fiction, but it works for crime, erotica, some science fiction, some fantasy, but it doesn't work with kind of general fiction.
Okay, thank you. I think my internet might not be so great. Right, so How does the percentage work in terms of on your side with your, you know, in as a publisher? How does the percentage work with signing up an author? And can writers approach you directly, or do they have to come through an agent?
No, we work with agents. I have some issues with lots of agents, but we do work with agents. But again, like Sammy says, I think most independents, I mean, we're open for submissions all year round. I'm a bit greedy. I don't want to miss out on anything. And that's why I think we're winning or being shortlisted and winning most of the prizes. Not Bluemoose, but the independent sector, is that we're reading more manuscripts. We're reading more stories from a much wider and a very kind of broad sweep of people who are writing. Whereas if you're, you know, the big 10 publishers will not read unsolicited manuscripts, only manuscripts that go via agents. And if agents are the gatekeepers to the publishing industry, with quite a lot of them, their kind of criteria is how much can I make out of this book, which isn't an aesthetic principle or a literary principle. It's a kind of monetary principle. Therefore, you go into the whole question of kind of like censorship. What is art? What is, you know, what are books for? If literature is about anything, it's about finding great new voices that then will kind of tell new and different stories. If it's about just providing money for the big five, then that's a completely different publishing industry, isn't it? I think almost the independent sector, we're operating a parallel publishing industry to the mainstream publishers, because, you know, I don't want to get involved in just publishing blancmange.
Yeah, and echoing that, you had an analogy earlier. I think we're putting out some artisan products. You know, it's not your pulpy paperbacks that you'll read. They are pieces of art. Literature is art, be it genre fiction or literary fiction. With Grimbold, to answer the question, with Grimbold, we have a standard contract. We don't offer an advance purely, and I'll be honest, purely because I can't afford an advance. If I'm putting 1,500 quid of my money into the book, I can't do the advance as well. And we use print on demand, but I use a company called Lightning Source. So I do have, they do distribute via Gardeners to all the bookstores as well. So they can be ordered in, and Waterstones do order quite a few of our books in store as well, and we offer 50% on ebooks, 10% on print copies, unless we're selling those print copies direct, and which we can offer 50%, which I'll explain why. Because bookstores ask for a massive discount off the list price because they've got to make their profits. So for simple maths, if you've got a book at £10, RRP of £10, Waterstones will ask for a 60% discount, so they'll ask for £6. So if your book's costing then £2 to print, there's only £2 profit in that book. So you've got to shift a lot of books to break even, or to then make a profit. So we're always very transparent about what we can offer, and the sort of numbers that we expect people to sell with us. You know, we are small. We are what's classed as a micro press, but we have control over those novels that we like to take on. And echoing what Kevin was saying about agents, we've had people come through agents, but we also accept unsolicited manuscripts. So you can contact us direct. We do have submission windows purely because of the job that I do outside. I kind of need to know that I'm going to have a 3-month open window, and then I'm going to be reading for the next few months, because I can't stay open 12 months of the year. I'd never get anything done because I'd be so obsessed with reading. But if I know you personally, or if I've met you before, I absolutely encourage people to come to me direct with my contact details and say, hi, we met at, I don't know, Storyfest. This is my novel. Boom. Just because the submission window is closed, it doesn't necessarily mean the lines of communication between us are closed. So, and like we were saying earlier, for some of you that were here for the panel before, agents aren't the be all and end all in publishing. You can get contracts without agents with mainstream publishers, like I did with Rebellion, who there are publishers out there that will still take on those weird, quirky books that don't fit the market, and they do so because they're taking a risk on you or they love that story. As Kevin says, the bigger five, that it is about profit margins, but also for mid-list indie publishers, which I would say Rebellion it falls within that. It's also about reputation, and if they can take on 10 books, 5 of those they know are going to sell absolutely like hotcakes, or 5 books that are word of mouth going to become cult underground hits or polarizing novels, but will get the name of the publishing company out there, they will take that risk, because again, they want to build their reputation as well. And that's what we've done before. We've taken on novels that have lost us a lot of money, but they're absolutely fantastic stories. And people now recognise us within the science fiction and fantasy arena, especially in the UK, as being publishers that will take a risk and take a chance. And I think that's fabulous.
We do give advances that range from about 250 quid to £3,000. So we work with agents and we do unsolicited as well. But it depends on how many we think we can sell.
Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. It's my internet connection. Latest internet is worse than mine. So I will ask the next question. The next question is, some writers talk about how they have to do their own marketing, even if they have an agent or a publisher. So could you discuss the kind of marketing that you do and your company does for new authors? And does it depend on the genre?
I think for Grimbold, being science fiction and fantasy and genre based, we do a lot of conventions within the UK, which seems to be the working norm for sci-fi and fantasy small micro presses. So we go to BristolCon, FantasyCon, EasterCon, all the little conventions in between as well. Word of mouth, internet, there's social media, love it or hate it, is almost like a necessity nowadays for authors to sort of shout about their book. Don't do it all the time. There's nothing worse than 100 preset tweets on your same book saying it's for sale, because then that's just like standing in the pub and shouting constantly, buy my book. But we work together as a team. So we don't have marketers, but we do put a catalogue out. So we put a catalogue out via Gardeners, which a lot of presses do as well, usually 12 to 18 months in advance, saying these are our upcoming titles. In that catalogue, you have the cover art if you've got it, any reviews from places like Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, Blue Ink, and you put those reviews in along with the synopsis of the book, because what you want those bookstores to order some copies of your book prior to publication to have on their shelves, so that come publication day, everyone will rush to the bookstores and buy it. Science fiction and fantasy is slightly different. It is a more friendly, we call them bar cons. So when you go to conventions, most people spend a lot of time at the bar discussing novels. You have your agent chats at the bar. God blimey, Adam and I sat at a convention before drinking and came up with the ideas of all the book of series. So deals are made at the bar. It is a very friendly and inclusive genre, and if you can get solid staple names within the genre to read your book and to blurb it, as we say, give it praise for the cover, that can go a long way. A really good example of that is Katrina Ward. So her The House on Needless Street, I think it's called. Stephen King read it, absolutely loved it. Viper Books had a really good marketing campaign with that they had all the blurbs done 12 months before the book came out, and all the social media posters were fabulous. They had billboards in London, lots of praise everywhere from all these big names. So the word of mouth, so people start thinking, oh, who is this author? Kat isn't an unknown, but she's not a big name, but Stephen King's liking it, Joe Hill's like it, what's going on? And she was between the covers as well on BBC Two for her novel. So it's all about prepping and planning the lead up to that big release on the book. It is for us, certainly it is a joint team effort, because if you're not passionate about your book and you're not selling your book, it's a lot to put on your publisher to just do it all themselves. So, you know, we would say to sit down with you and say, right, what do you want to do? Because if you're an introvert, you're not going to want to do a lot of face-to-face interviews, you know, potential readings in bookstores. But what can you do? What strengths can you play to? So we do tailor the market plan to the author, and we're very realistic about sales. You know, if you don't market anything, people don't know it's there, you're not going to sell it. It's, you know, we've had an author who absolutely does not want to market at all because of their day job. They're quite high up and quite famous. They write under a pseudonym. They purely just want their books out there for people to read, but they don't want any marketing because they don't want people to find out who they are. Well, they don't sell many books. You know, if we can't talk about the books, we can't sell the books. So I would say it is really important that people get involved with the marketing, but that you sit down with your publisher, your agent, if you've got one, your editor, and talk them through and sort of say, what do you want to do? So yeah, we've got the catalogue, we do the social media, we do the conventions, the word of mouth. We will do everything we can to push your book.
Yeah, very much like Sammy. 6 months before the book is published, we will have 150 proofs or advanced reading copies of that book printed, and we'll send those to excuse me, 50 of the top independent booksellers in the country, 50 top Waterstones, and then newspaper reviewers, but also kind of bloggers, book bloggers and book YouTubers, etc., and get them talking about the book before, you know, 6 months before it's published. And that, with Leonard and Hungry Paul by Renan Hesham, that made it a word of mouth bestseller. People were tweeting about it, you know, 3-4 months before, and creating that kind of momentum. We got lots of we get lots of reviews in kind of the Guardian, the Sunday Times, the Times, etc. But we've built over 15 years. I call them the Bluemoose Keteers, and they just love what we do, and they love our books. They love pictures of a dog in the morning called Eric, and they really get behind everything we seem to do, which is fantastic. And that's an online community, and we meet them at various book fairs and events and shows and that, and Waterstones. But having that kind of book community behind you all the time, one, it's a great comfort, but they do actually buy books. At the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, March 2020, when all the bookshops were closed, I just put out a call to arms saying, you know, all the bookshops are closed. Our website isn't brilliant, but if you can buy direct, that could keep us, you know, publishing some great stories in the future. And that one tweet, we sold £5,000 of the books in 48 hours. And it's that support for independent presses and independent voices and different voices. And also it was, I won't say it was a two-finger gesture to kind of Jeff Bezos as he was on his way to the moon in his rocket, but I think people were moving up. I mean, Amazon is always going to be there, but it was people who can afford it moving away from Amazon as the default bookshop and searching for independent presses and different stories and buying direct, on one, helping the publisher, but also helping the author, because if you buy direct, the writer gets more money, we get a bit more money, which means we can reinvest in them finding and editing great new voices and great new stories. And that makes people have a sense of belonging in what you're doing as a publisher, and being part of the whole process. They might not physically be part of the process, but it's building that kind of authenticity into a kind of a book community. And readers are terribly loyal. And when they feel that they're part of what you're trying to do, it gives them a sense of kind of, I won't say wonder, but a sense of being part of something that is making a difference within the writing community. And that is so important. It takes a bit longer. And we don't ask all our kind of authors to get into, you know, social media and having to dance on TikTok, because that's just ridiculous. But my background is sales and marketing, so I have all those contacts within the kind of Waterstone, Smiths, the library suppliers, Amazon, etc., and the wholesalers. But just talking about books and not necessarily talking about your own book is a way of just speaking to people who like words and who like stories, and they will be tremendously supportive. And I think that's a way forward. The big publishers can't do it because they're too big. It's like a tanker. They can't make decisions. They have to have a kind of planogram over about 76 hours or something. Whereas smaller publishers, we can make decisions, like Sammy said, we can make decisions within a minute. Heaven forfend that you decide to publish something because you love it. We publish books because we fall in love with them, like Sammy. Publishing is dead easy. It's just finding readers, then, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say about the marketing as well, moving on to like book covers. Today's day and age, book covers, people want them to be as pretty as possible because of the aesthetics of things like They Go Beautiful, the aesthetics of things like Instagram and TikTok, where people just take a snapshot of that book. And never underestimate sort of like the book bloggers that are on Instagram and TikTok, because their reach is huge. So if you've got a beautiful product, something that you've spent time and money and energy creating, this cover, covers do sell books. If you're going to spend a fortune and the author's going to spend years of their life writing the novel, I want to make sure that the cover that I'm putting out does justice for it. We also use NetGalley every now and again, which is an online website for ARC, advanced reader copies of books, of ebooks. We don't put every single novel up on NetGalley. Again, it comes down to cost. But certainly those novels that we feel are extra special, we will put them on NetGalley so that people can download and review them before publication. Hopefully that word of mouth, put them on their blog, put them on their Instagram, tell the world how much they loved them or hated them. But tell people about those books, because reviews sell, and like I said before, bad reviews sell books as well, and literature is subjective, so you can have a story that evokes emotion in someone. It might be absolutely repulsive emotion and it's a 1-star review, or it might be a 5-star absolutely singing all dancing review. But if somebody's taken that time to put that on there, I know from a fact from my 1-star SFX magazine review for my novel that it sold absolutely thousands of copies from it, and Rebellion loved it because so many people picked up that magazine and thought, my god, why did this reviewer hate it so much, and went out and bought it. And then as I've said before, we know the Times liked it. So it is subjective, but reviews sell books. So if you ever pick up a book and you love it, put a review on Amazon, on Waterstones, on Barnes and Noble, on your social media, tag those authors, tell them that you love their work, because it not only inspires the author then to want to continue to write, but it also is another imprint on the internet history, a little cache of that novel. So if somebody was searching Anna, Sammy H.K. Smith, and then they come across your blog and your review, this is all good stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to Sammy and to Kevin, of course, to Lolita and Bea. I'm just conscious because you guys have given really helpful and insightful comments, advice, and so on. Because we've got sort of 10 minutes or so of the session, I just wanted to pick up some of the questions from the chat, for both of you. So I'd start off with a more general one from Roy, who says, assuming it's not been pitched to you by an agent and you've not yet read the book, what's the first and or most important aspects which would attract you when you're being approached regarding a new novel by a new author?
The writing, the quality of the writing, and the story. If the quality of the writing isn't there, I'm going to get disinterested quite quickly. So yeah, always send the first 3 chapters and a synopsis. I'm not too bothered about a covering letter and what you've done previously in your life. I'm just interested in what you've written, and again, it all goes down to the quality of the writing for me.
If I go a step back before I even read your book, make sure that Grimbold is going to be the right publisher for you. Don't send me literary or crime fiction because I don't publish it. Make sure that whoever you are pitching your novel or your work to, firstly, publishes in that genre or that style, and that you feel that they're going to be a good fit. We see it far too often where people fire out scattergun generic letters to us, haven't even been to our website, seen who we are, what we publish, just saying, here I am, here's my book, when are you going to publish it, sort of thing. You know, take your time to research your publisher.
Do your homework. Yeah,
do your homework. And if you are doing me a covering letter, I don't expect it to be stilted. A stilted letter, dear sir, madam, you know, call me Sammy, put it in there. Be approachable. Tell me about you, you know, because I want to know about you. Tell me a bit about the book, but I want to know about you. And then as Kevin said, you know, we normally like 3 chapters and a synopsis. If you're sending me perhaps 180,000 epic fantasy with 12 different points of view, then tell me that straight away. And also, if you're sending me book 1 of a series, I need to know that. I don't want to sign up a book thinking it's a standalone, and then you're going, oh, by the way, there's another 4 books in this series. You know, I'm not saying it's a deal breaker. We've got series of books ongoing, you know, that's absolutely fine, but just be very open and transparent when you contact us. But it is all about those first few pages for me as well. The style, the authorial voice, the prose. I want to be sucked into your story. And we like something different. We don't want to publish what every other publisher is publishing, you know, send us something special to make us sit up.
Get the name of the company right, that helps.
Yes. Well,
and like Sammy says, I want to be grabbed by the throat and dragged through a book for 300 pages, and you know, and then at the end I want to breathe. That's what I want.
Kevin, I got incredibly grumpy, and I'm still salty from 2013 at World Fantasy Con when we came back to a submission going, it was lovely to meet Sammy at FantasyCon. Please send him, give him my submission. I was like, I'm not a man. I don't have anything against men, you know, but I am clearly a woman. Make sure that you're getting things right, and don't just presume that it's going to be a man that's running the publishing company.
International Women's Day as well. Remember that, folks.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Sammy, and of course, Kevin too. I have a question from one of our MA novel students, Ezra. She says, I'm looking to publish in Germany as well as the UK and hopefully America. So although she asked a question to Kevin, but I'm also interested about this for you, Sammy. Do you have translators that you work with? And a follow-up question to that, she says, being German and her job is a translator, she wonders, would it make more sense to translate her book herself or to work with other translators? Of course, this goes for other languages apart from German.
We don't have translators because we would sell the rights to a German publisher and they would have their own translators doing it. Probably not best for the author to translate their own work because, you know, they haven't got the kind of, they're not living in that country, I wouldn't have thought. And so it's so nuanced as well. So you want a specialist translator, and I'm not saying you're not a specialist translator, but we sell rights to different territories around the world, and the individual publishers in those territories will have their own translators.
Perfect.
Yeah, to echo that, we don't translate either. We do the same. We did have a disaster story where somebody translated their novel. They were Norwegian, from English to Norwegian, but obviously a lot was lost in translation. So again, we wouldn't recommend doing it. And when it comes to the USA, we do English rights for our novels when we sign. So we do Commonwealth, including Australia, New Zealand and North America as a standard for our contracts, but certainly for foreign rights we leave those with the author to negotiate any potential interest from other countries.
Okay,
brilliant. No, that makes a lot of sense. Great. Another question from the chat. This is from Amanda, another one of our MA novel writing students, and I think it chimes with Sammy, your comment about this being International Women's Day, which is all about kind of representation. She says, it's a question for Kevin. Do you think there's a growing interest in working class voices and working class women's experiences, or might there be more such interest in the future? I'm asking because I'm writing a book about working class women in rural Suffolk. I found very few novels about working class women in rural England.
Yeah, all of the women that we publish are from working class backgrounds. Heidi James, Colette Snowden, Sharon Dougal, Joe Macmillan, the last Anna Chilvers, the last 5 authors that we published are all working class writers. They haven't necessarily written about rural England. It's mostly kind of urban settings that they have their books in. But people want to read different stories from wherever. I mean, it's reading other people's about other people's lives that what makes us more empathetic and hopefully better humans, doesn't it? So definitely we need to kind of read more women's working class fiction, more men's working class fiction, rural, urban, or from wherever, from other countries, because it makes us better people, doesn't it? And that's where the bigger publishers fall down massively, because they don't think there's a market. They don't think there's any culture outside of the M25,
No.
which is just an absolute nightmare. But it doesn't make any economic sense either, because there's 45 million people live outside the M25. So there's 45 million people who want to read about things that they pass every day in their lives. So yeah, I think there's huge interest.
Brilliant.
And we're doing something about it as well.
Great, thank you. So people from diverse backgrounds who are listening, take note. Great, so I had just a couple more questions on the chat. One is from Ben, who's asking, would you look at something which isn't quite finished? Doesn't say quite what that means, but yeah, something that's like.
Yeah, yes, we would. I wouldn't be happy for you to just drop it into my inbox, because I don't have time to sit there. But if we're engaging in dialogue and we're communicating via email or chat or bark on or whatnot, and you're pitching an idea to me or a story, then yes, I would. Because as I mentioned before, we do take on authors to mentor. I do it because it's a massive time suck. There's no doubt about it. It's a massive time suck, and there's very little economical sense to it, but I do it because I love what I'm doing with Grimbold, and I love literature, and I love writing, and I love stories. I'm not saying that I'm the be all or end all, but I'm a developmental editor as well as the publishing and my main job. So I'm quite happy to sit there and look at a story that isn't quite finished, because if I get those flutters reading the first few pages or reading the synopsis and thinking this is special, then yes, if the author wants to work with us, then I will work with them.
I don't. You've got to have finished it. Because I want you to have the confidence in your own story before you send it out. But again, it's very subjective, isn't it? But yeah, because for me, there's nothing worse than saying, yeah, send me the whole book, and they say, oh, well, I just wanted the validation from you to finish it. Well, then if you haven't got the confidence in your own writing, then please finish it before you send, your first 3 chapters out. Just got to let the dog out, excuse me.
Interesting to have different perspectives there. It shows just how subjective it is and how carefully you have to look at and approach publishers, so to ask these questions. So thank you both of you for coming. I think it's very fitting that the last question that I've got comes from Lolita, who steered this session so deftly as part of the organising panel for Storyfest. It's again quite a specific one about the shift from self-publishing to publishing with yourselves, and she wanted to know, how would you view a self-published author who brings a new book to you, but they've retained the rights to their previous novel? And if you were interested in it, would it be just in this book, or would you also be interested in their previous work? And this is from Roy as well.
If you've got a new book, that's not a problem. If it's already been published, we probably wouldn't republish that book because it's already got an audience and a readership. But if you've got a second book that hasn't been published, or you haven't self-published that, then that wouldn't be a problem. We'd certainly look at that. Yeah, but as a rule, I mean, rules are always there to be broken, aren't they? But as a rule, if you've already self-published, we wouldn't republish that. But if you have a new story and a new book that you want us to look at, we'd certainly look at that. That wouldn't be a problem.
Brilliant, and thank you. Sorry, Sammy, did you want to?
No.
Yeah, So Lolita was asking that on behalf of Roy. For herself, she was saying, what about people who are actually interested in working in publishing? Like, where would you suggest they start?
Well, I would be very careful going to places that give unpaid internships for starters. You have to know your own worth. Editorial assistants are usually a good place to start, or even in the marketing department of a publisher, because certainly I know places like Rebellion take on their new starters in the industry into the marketing department first, so that they understand what it is that they're going to be expected to do before they progress to editorial assistant or editor. But then I've also known people to walk straight into commissioning editing roles with no previous experience of book buying effectively. So it's really difficult. I would say to go to a bigger press first than a small one, because you're going to get a more varied workload, whereas a small press, certainly like us, we've had people come and do sort of work for us ad hoc, but we don't put enough output for you to really gain that experience. So editorial assistant, or for me, I'd say marketing would be the two places to look at to start with, if that's what you're interested in. I don't know what Kevin thinks.
Well, we're part of the Northern Fiction Alliance, so there's 12 Northern publishers, and there is a scheme where you can work with for a couple of weeks with each publisher in various roles: production, editorial, sales, marketing, etc. So that's one way of not having to go down to London, but it's you know, again, it's managing expectations. It's terribly difficult to get into publishing because it's still basically white, middle class. You got to have a bit of money if you're going to, you know, work in London. Hence, that's why we're based in Hebden Bridge, because we don't have those kind of costs. But you can do it. Start your own publisher like we did.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, I know Robert Peat from Holland House did some work with some university and did what he called the Novella Project, which was with creative writing and MA students, and a Arts Council grant to put out, I think it was 6 novellas, with the MA students being the editor and sort of being in charge of that project. It's something that we're dipping a toe in, and I'm researching to see whether or not it would work for science fiction and fantasy, but it's a good way to bridge what you guys are all doing in education with publishing. And certainly I would say, you know, have a look at Holland House, because they're a literary publisher as well. I think An Island, which was Karen Jennings' novel, was longlisted for the Booker this year. And Rob started Holland House the same time as I started Grimbold. In fact, we started Grimbold together, and he then speared off into literary fiction, and I speared off into science fiction and fantasy. So there are small presses are doing good things for those looking to start their career here, but just find